Hi guys, welcome back. Let's talk about RAG. I think this is the most revolutionary thing that has ever happened for the LLMs. It's very fascinating, yet it's very hard, hectic to implement. Lucky for us, using the Eden AI's API, we can use the RAG. We can easily integrate the RAG into our own projects, right? But before that, how can we do it? How can we implement RAG on the Eden AI's platform as well as the API? That's what we'll be talking about here in this tutorial. So we will be covering the essential concepts, like what exactly is RAG and how are we going to build a project, RAG project from scratch, and some parameters. We'll go through the parameters as well, and we'll test it on the platform. We'll understand the database chunks, chunkings, and etc. etc. And finally, we'll try to implement this in our own project using the API. So this will be a bit lengthier video as well. So please be patient, and you'll enjoy this for sure. So without any further delay, let's get started. Okay, so when we navigate to the RAG chatbot option here on Eden AI's platform, you can see a minimal information provided, like what exactly RAG chatbot is, and how can you customize the chatbot, how can you add the data source and talk with the data as well, right? So how can we do it? Like, let's see it in action now. So we go create our first project. Let's just keep the name test one. So we have two options. One is to quick start using the default settings, which Eden AI has already provided. And then you can go with the custom settings where you can start from scratch, choose everything on your own. Let's go choose the custom settings for now. Um, okay. Okay. So RAG technique. What type of RAG do you want? So RAG is basically the traditional RAG. So for the guys who may not have an idea on what RAG is, I'll try to summarize it in a very quick way as possible. So let's say you have a context and could be PDF or Word or any text or any context. So you basically store them. You transform them into embeddings or the vectors, and you store them into the vector DB. Right. Once you have a question related to the context you have, that query will be converted into embeddings again. And this query embeddings will be compared with the embeddings that are already present inside the vector DB, right? So they use something called cosine similarity score. Using that score, we try to get the relevant chunks out of the vector DB. So the reason behind these embeddings are really good at understanding semantics, right? So the cosine similarity score is works in such a way that um, you know even if the phrase is modified, even if you rephrase the sentence and the semantic remains the same, right? uh, you'll get the exact result out of it. So you don't have to worry about rephrasing, you don't have to worry about the words. It's in the end it's the meaning, right? So that's basically RAG, right? So there are other long RAG, self RAG, G RAG, graph RAG, adaptive RAG. These are all the advanced RAG techniques. These are useful for boosting up the you know uh, technique. So yeah, let's go ahead and choose the traditional RAG for now. And database provider. Okay, so Eden AI has its own provides the vector DBs as well, like Superbase and Qtrand. If you have your own DB, you can go ahead and choose your URL and key. For now, I'll go with Eden AI's DB. Embeddings provider. As I mentioned before, every sentence, every textual content has to be converted into embeddings. So we need an embeddings provider. So I'll choose OpenAI for now. And in order to chat with the model, chat with the context, you need an LLM, right? So I'll go with GPT-4o. Chunk size 1200, I'll just keep it like that. Chunk separators, so once the context gets chunked, right? So how is the chunking happening? Like what exactly are the rules behind the chunking, right? So these are the separators. This is how the chunking is happening. Dots, I mean full stops, or the spaces or new lines, double new lines or something. If you have your own custom, you can just add it here and then add it. For now I'll just keep it like that. And then OCR model, let's say you input an image. So the text content from the image has to be OCR'd out. So you can use an OCR model. So I heard Mistral is really good, so I'll choose Mistral now. Speech to text again. If the input is speech or any audio file, you need a speech to text model. So I'll go ahead with OpenAI and I'll create the project. There you go. So this is the project. The test one is the project for now, and this is how you basically start your RAG project, RAG chatbot project. Okay, so let's understand this UI. So what exactly is placed here, right? So you can see the chat. This is where you can chat with the LLM based on your context. And if you click on the database chunks, this is where you basically get the data source, the chunks here. And finally, installation, which we'll talk about in a while. Let's go to the chat again. And so you can see data source on the right. So we can add our own context. That's what I was mentioning. So let me add a file. So before that, you can also choose text if you have any, directly. And finally, URL if you want to scrape any data, the website from if you want to scrape any website and use that as a context, you can use a URL option. If you have your own text, you can just paste the text here. And if you have a PDF or MP3, WAV, CSV, XML, you can upload your data here. So for now, I have a PDF with some fake contacts. Probably I can use it. And then I'll just upload it. Okay. Let me just give it a while to upload. Once it is uploaded, we also have something called system prompt. So this is nothing but instructions. So instructions for your bot. So you can create new. Probably you can give something like rule checker. Make sure there are no spaces, because it doesn't accept spaces. So should not give any spaces. Instructions. Okay, so probably something like always say thank you after you finish the conversation. Probably a simple rule, something like that, and upload. Okay, so it's there, and we also uploaded a data source. Okay, let's go to the chat section. We can see the conversation one, which is our current conversation. You can create new, but for now it's conversation one. And then we can choose our own LLM here. Probably I'll use GPT-4o, and then I'll send a message. So from the PDF, there's someone called Maxime. So I'll ask who is Maxime. Right, just enter. Oh, Maxime is an advocate uh, in France. His contact information. Yeah. So that's it. I mean, it's so good. So uh, and thank you. This is what we expected from the rules, right? Okay. This is the basic understanding. This is the basic idea of how you can test and play with the RAG. If you go to the database chunks, these are the three chunks that got retrieved from the question we asked, right? So you can actually delete them, and you can see the number of chunks, and if you have more number, you can probably filter them out and see. So it's quite easy to understand the chunks that got out, right? I mean, sometimes it's essential to see the desired chunks are getting out or not. So if you go to the installation page, this is pretty important, because you have created your own chat, you've played, you have tested, But how can you implement this in your own project? That's the question. So you can see there's there are three things here. One is upload a document, and then generate an answer, and finally embed your chatbot into your app or website. Okay. So let's focus on these two for now. Uploading a document, how can you do it? So this is the code snippet that you can use directly if you're using Python environment. And if you want to add a URL, add a file, you can select, and you can select the code snippet. um, so basically you have to connect it with the project ID, which the current test one has its own project ID, right? So you have to use that. Lucky for us, we don't need to, you know, sit and tailor the code. If we have the code snippet available directly here, we can just take it and use it. And similarly, to generate an answer, this is the code snippet that you can use. If you have a Node.js environment, you can go ahead and use this JavaScript code snippet. So these are the two endpoints we have in this RAG chatbot. But if you go to the documentation, you can see there are plenty of endpoints, like creating conversation, deleting a conversation. Uh, let's go in detail. Let's understand what exactly we have, right? So if we go to the documentation, you can see under the custom chatbot RAG section, you can see a lot of endpoints, right? Starting with list projects. I'm not going to explain all of them in detail because they are most of them are self-explanatory. So let's see the few important ones which I'll be going to implement in the future using Fast API. So list of projects is basically, it lists down all the projects you have, right? So create a project. This is where you can create your own project, right? So if you go through it, it's clearly explained like how exactly we are going to create our own project, the body params that are essential, right? And then how can you add a file, right? It's the same thing. So you try to relate what I've mentioned, what I've shown from the platform. So how can we add a file, and then how can we add texts and also URLs? So these are the three different endpoints, they post endpoints that made. And ask LLM. This is where you basically ask queries to the LLM, and the LLM will answer based on the context you gave, right? And basically, create conversation is where you create a thread. When I say thread, everything is like everything follows the context based on the chat, right? So you can create multiple conversations and you can initiate the new ones, right? And retrieve conversation, update conversation, everything is like self-explanatory. And how can you create a bot profile, right? Bot profile is nothing but the instructions. How can you create? You can use this post method to create a bot, right? And then deleting, getting files, deleting chunks, right? So removing bot prompts. So all of them are like self-explanatory. How can you delete a project finally? So we basically pass a delete method for this particular endpoint. So this is basically the quick overview of how the chatbot can be implemented using the API. And you can actually play around here as well. You provide your beta token and you can try that. That can be done. So now I'm going to show you how I have implemented this thing using Fast API. A small simple code I've used. There's nothing innovative. Everything the code base that I've taken is from the documentation and also from the platform itself. So I might have tweaked a bit based on my own project's requirements, but yeah, there's nothing innovative, so it should be easy to follow. So let's go ahead and see the Fast API code. Okay, so here we are. This is the Fast API application that I made for the project. The test. Whatever. Okay, so it's quite simple. I've imported all the required methods or the libraries. and then I used API key, 8 AI's API key. I hope you know how to get 8 AI's API key. If not, there's a separate video out there. You can go ahead and check it out. And this is the base URL, so it should be constant, right? So I just gave a base URL, and finally the app. I added the course. If you are using it for the production, you may have to change it. Just heads up. And then I provided the headers, and there are some helper classes that I made, something like create project request, bot profile request. So these are the params that you expect, right? So almost all of the um, APIs that we have covered while going through the documentation, I have explained. I have uh, created the endpoints here as well, just to test it in locally, right? So okay, so the first one is project management. Like, how do you create a new project? So this method is basically used to create a new project. Again, nothing innovative. I took the exact same code from the documentation and I've used it here. So and then how to list all the RAG projects, right? So it's a get method again. So I used this and retrieve a RAG project, and how to delete a RAG project. So till here, probably I gave everything like the project management related endpoints in one place, and then I created a bot profile management endpoint here, right? So create a bot profile, which is nothing but the instructions, right? And then remove a bot profile. Simple, these two, right? And then uploading a file, which is essential. So I made sure that it's properly handled, for the error handling is good or not. And then especially for the file, you know and then I gave again one more post endpoint for text, and finally one for the URLs, right? So data management is done, and then I created an endpoint for LLMs, asking the questions to LLMs, right? So this is the endpoint, and then I've created one. And for the conversation, creating and deleting a conversation, listing a conversation, so I've created endpoints for that as well. And finally, query the project data, right? So in order to query the project data, we have an endpoint mentioned, so I used the same code again. So and finally deleting the chunks, deleting the files, so kind of a cleanup. So I did all of the essential endpoints mentioned in my project. So don't worry about it. Anyway, I'll share this code snippet with you guys, so you may have a look. You'll understand when you look into the code base. So I ran this, and it's currently running in my local in the local host. So let's go ahead and test all the uh, things here. Okay. So first things first. Okay. So these are the projects, right? If you, I mean, this is what I gave, right? If I think I gave the name as test project here. Yeah. And the collection name is test collection, and I just ran. If I do this, yeah. So it generates a project ID. We may need this, just copy it. It's very important. Project ID is the heart. And then let's go to the next one, which is basically creating a bot profile, right? So for that, we need the project ID. So I just copied the project ID here, just paste it. And if I do that, ah, okay. Just a second, probably something like test bot. Okay, now it created successfully again. And if you go here, this is basically uploading the files, right? If you remember, so you can choose the data type as PDF, like what exactly the data is, right? MP3, PDF, docs, something like that. You can choose that, and the file is the same file which I've used for the demo, and I then just paste it, and send it. That's it. Now you got a file ID, right? This file ID is used if you want to delete it in the future, if you want to list a particular, if you want any details regarding that file, you need this file ID. Probably you can store it somewhere. And similarly, if you go to the texts, let's say if you have some context available directly instead of a PDF or URL, you can use these texts in a list format, and you can hit send, and the text will be added successfully, right? And let's say if you have URLs, right, something like hidden AI, or I used docs.hidden AI, and then that's it. URLs added successfully. Finally, okay, so we have added all the data, right? So I asked the same question. I asked Maxime, and now I ask who is Julie, and we got the result. Julie is an informatician, etc., etc. And these are the chunk IDs. Like, if you remember, like it's got chunked, right? So these are the 3 chunk IDs. You may need this again to know the information about the chunks or to delete them. So you have to somehow store these IDs for the future use cases, right? And how do you create a new conversation? Simple. This is the endpoint, post endpoint, and then you just give the name. That's it. It creates a new endpoint. Sorry, it creates a new conversation along with the ID, conversation ID. Again, so the IDs are pretty useful. They are mandatory if you want to delete or if you want to get an information from that particular source, right? So you have to store all of these IDs. And if you go to the query endpoint and you asked, uh, so what documents contain information about RAG, right? So it is very fascinating endpoint. You basically get all the information and score. So it says 0.3%, or probably I can say 30%. It says that, okay, in this particular page you can find this particular information, right? So it gets all the results of your queries along with the score. It's very important. um, and if you go to the next endpoint, it's basically deleting the chunks, right? So if you remember, we have the chunk IDs, right? So we can take one of the chunk ID and then we can delete it. So you can write some logic saying, okay, you can iterate and delete all the chunks, but there is already another endpoint to delete all the chunks, which I have not implemented in this fast API, but it's mentioned in the docs. You can delete all the chunks available. And similarly for the files, I created an endpoint delete. So you can delete the file based on the file IDs. And again, you can also delete all the files available using an endpoint mentioned in the docs as well, right? So the final endpoint, just to check how many files are left. So it's basically retrieve all the files, and we can see I only have one file left. So yeah, so this is how you can implement the API that you get from creating a RAG project. You can actually take the existing API and use it. I mean, you can use the existing project. When I say RAG, I mean project ID. You can use the existing project ID and you can manipulate it, or you can start from scratch, uh, either from the platform or directly from your project as well. So it's quite interesting, and it's very useful as well. So yeah. So that's it, guys. I mean, this is the tutorial. This is how we build RAG, and I hope you guys have understood. I hope you guys have enjoyed as well. So if you do, thank you so much, and I'll see you again.